Hello and welcome to the Global Poker League and our new strategy segment where we ask one of our guest pros to take us through a hand in detail from the GPL. I'm joined by Jonathan Little once again, and he's going to take us through a hand between the fantastic heads-up match between Justin Bonomo and Dominik Nitsche. This was an explosive hand in game one, 4 hands in. Jonathan, what happened in this one?
Well, these players like to fight, and they came ready to battle.
They
so
did.
Here we are, 4th hand of the match. Dominik's going to raise with King 8 offsuit, which is perfectly fine. I mean, King 8 offsuit's a great hand. And now Justin decides to 3-bet with Ace 10 suited. This is something that Justin likes to do, and also what I generally get the vibe that a lot of the cash game players like to do. There are players in the Global Poker League who come from cash games, and there are others who come from tournaments. A lot of the tournament players seem to call in spots like this with Ace 10, King Jack, stuff like that, but a lot of the cash game players are re-raising it. So it's a difference in styles. I imagine Justin Bonomo probably knows what's best because he's perhaps the best in the world. So he makes a big re-raise from out of position. You want to cut down on your opponent's post-flop you want to cut down on their post-flop advantage because they are deep stacked versus you. And if you make it bigger, it cuts down on that.
Dominik elects to flat the 3-bet here, I believe.
Yeah, so this is a tough spot. I mean, you don't just want to be folding your King 8 offsuit whenever you get 3-bet, but at the same time, it's not a good hand. So he does 3-bet, we see a flop, here we are. Flop comes 10-6 for 2 hearts. A lot of people think this is a spot where Dominik has an easy fold if he faces a bet, but he actually has another very tough spot because he has a backdoor flush draw, a good one with the king, a backdoor straight draw, and in his mind, a king or an 8 could very easily be good. So for that reason, he probably needs to stick around if Justin throws out a bet. So the pot's 8,400. As Justin bets smaller, Dominik has to defend way more often. I think Justin tends to bet on the bigger side though, in general. So I would not be surprised if he throws out a somewhat large bet, but you know, still a small bet. He does a small bet in 3-bet pots, which is what the majority of players do. They bet small on somewhat dry board. And this may not appear to be an incredibly dry board, but it's dry enough. It's kind of hard for your opponent to have 6-4 in a 3-bet pot, right? So you're not so worried about very many hands. If the board was instead 10-9-7, maybe he bets a little bit bigger. It's tough to say. So after a bit of thought, Dominik does stick around, as I think he probably should. His hand's just a little bit too good to get out of the way. And he gets the most beautiful card in the deck to bluff on.
Perfect turn card for Dominik.
Perfect turn card to get in trouble. So now, in Justin's spot, a lot of players blindly bet here because they want to charge the draws, right? They think if I bet, I can price out the draws or I can at least get money in while I'm ahead. But Justin does something very different that you will see a lot of the cash game players do. He decides to check because he realizes now, I want Dominik to bluff. If Dominik has Queen Jack or Ace King,
Well, the hand he has.
or King 8, right? He really wants to let Dominik put money in the pot. And that's exactly what's going to happen. And then Justin has to figure out if he wants to raise or call. And Justin mentioned in the commentary, he gave some fantastic commentary, both these players did, that he's pretty much always calling here, and he's never folding, he's never raising. When he checks this turn, he knows that unless the river is just horribly bad, like a Jack of Hearts or Queen of Hearts or something like that, he's calling on pretty much every river. So notice he has a very clearly thought out plan.
Yeah, he was actually, he made that very clear that the vast majority of rivers he was going to call even, if Dominik shoved, which is what you'll see ended up happening.
Maybe go a little bit faster next time. All right, so Dominik does bet 8,000 into the 15,400 pot. Notice that with Dominik's bet size, that brings the pot to 23,000. So if Justin now calls, the pot's gonna go up to 32,000, and Dominik's gonna have right at that amount going to the river. So when Dominik bets this size, it sets him up for a very nice pot size river all in. And that's important. You always wanna think ahead about how the pot's going to play out. We heard a few of the players yesterday discussing that openly about, I remember George Danzer discussing, I need to make sure I bet a little bit bigger here or a little bit smaller here so that I have a specific bet size going to the river. And Dominik here sets this up great where he has the pot size bet. So anyway, on the river, river's a 9. This is a card that Dominik certainly could have. He could have 9-8 or 9-7 or Jack 9. He could have all sorts of hands like that that would call on the flop. And Justin does check.
Yeah, and Dominik eventually we'll see elects to shove. Justin Bonomo, although he said he was fully intending to call, he does eventually, decide to give it some thought. Although, he reaches the decision that he sort of bowed himself to reach in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Justin had any intention on folding this river, and this is a relatively safe river. It's not like the best river. Obviously, rather an ace or a 10 come, but it's a safe enough river. You're only really losing to the hands that you were beat by on the turn anyway. And this is a hand that's very high up in Justin's range. Whenever you 3-bet pre-flop, I mean, this is a pretty good hand. Ace-10 is quite nice on a 10-6-4, 9-9 board. So Justin was pretty unhappy. Well, not pretty unhappy. I think he just made an easy call. And if I was in his shoes and I did like to check the turn and check the river, I would have made the somewhat easy call as well. But the real important thing here is that Justin did elect to check the turn, and that gave Dominik every opportunity to run a big bluff. And so instead of just betting the turn and getting called, and then betting the river and getting Dominik to fold, he ended up having Dominik put his entire stack in the pot, and it worked out amazingly well for him, and he ended up getting the victory.
Eventually makes the call, as you'll see if the video runs on just a little. You can see that Justin going through the kind of thoughts in his head regarding the hand, but he eventually makes the call and defeats Dominik in the hand 4 of that game.
It's important to realize here that Dominik also had very good reasons for why he was bluffing. I mean, when you call the flop with stuff like King 8 on this board, it's not just to try to hit your hand. You have to try to win the pot in other ways. If Dominik was calling only to try to get there, he should have just folded on the flop. But a lot of the great players realize that they have to try to steal pots that do not belong to them. And this is a good example of that. And you do want to have some bluffing hands. I don't think anyone would fault Dominik for this bluff. This was a fine spot to go for it. Notice that if Justin has pocket 8s or if he has ace-king, he's almost certainly going to fold by this river to this aggression. It just so happened that Justin had one of the better hands in his range, and he elected to play it a little bit cautiously by checking. Maybe more cagily than cautiously.
Slightly.
He just set the trap, and Dominik fell right in it.
Well, Dominik Nitsche was showing the heart of a bear, a Berlin bear in that hand, but it wasn't to be. And he ended up getting swept by Justin Bonomo. That's all from this particular hand. Thank you to Jonathan Little for taking us through it. Join us next time. Adios.
Connect with us on social media for league updates and download our app GPL TV to stay on top of everything GPL.